and welcome to the Rotary Club of Tulsa. I'm Karen Keith, and delighted to see so many of you here today. Our song and pledge will be by past President Matt Davis, and of course on the piano, Tom Wolf. Thank you very much. Yeah. And visitor introductions by Joy Longmire, and our invocation will be given by past President Matt Davis.
No, they couldn't get anybody else. That's why I'm doing three different things. We're going to do the national anthem. Oh, say, can you see my cross early light, what so proudly we hailed, and the twilight's last gleaming, with footsteps and bright stars, through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets that there, among thirsty air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? And our pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you could bow your heads with me, please. We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who causes bread to come forth from the earth. Blessed be the name of thy Lord, full of majesty, bounty, and honor. We all worship you, Lord, in our own way and through our own religion. We thank you for our many blessings and ask that we might be an instrument of your will to help others who are less fortunate. Bless those who prepared this food for us today and bless our Rotary meeting. Create in us a clean heart full of compassion and love. Amen.
It is my honor to give a warm welcome to our guests today. As I call your name, would you please stand, Rotarians, with your guest, and then we will recognize everyone once everyone has been introduced. Dick Cantrell's guest today is George J. Colson with Rooney Insurance. Phil Vile's guest is Billy Barlow from Miami, Oklahoma, and Billy is a TU graduate. Joseph Bias and Paula Wood are jointly hosting Phil Armstrong, who is a board member with the Bart Music Center. Chief Chuck Jordan's guest is one of his colleagues, George Fry. Linda Wilson is hosting Lynette Potter today. And I have it on good authority, she may be introduced as a new member soon. Bob Jack is hosting Randy Anatebi, a coworker. And Jerry Muratori is substituting for Jerry Barrientos, hosting Matthew Callahan with Service Master. We welcome you. Yes, there's a story behind that. And visiting Rotarians today from Southside Club is Mr. Ben Gorell. Hi, Ben. We welcome all of our visitors. We're so glad you came today, and we do certainly hope that you'll return again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you, Matt. Matt was just testing to see if we remembered the order. It was good for our brains. All right. We want to welcome two new Rotary sponsors this week. Dick Cantrell, thank you, Dick, and Casey King, the Doubletree by Hilton. We encourage you to do business with your fellow Rotarians. Please thank all of today's sponsors and all of our volunteers. We've got a few committee meetings today. IBA, room 232, and 2014-15 programs with Bob Sade, room 233, and Rotary Foundation, room 234. And here's an announcement. Habitat for Humanity is holding a Super Blitz beginning Sunday, June 1st through Friday. This is not an official Rotary Club of Tulsa event, but they need a lot more volunteers. So if this is something you would enjoy, please go to their website, Tulsa Habitat for Humanity, and sign up. Brenda Melancon helped us do a habitat build as a Rotary Club last year. We had a blast. So if this is something in your heart, please sign up and help them out. I got a plea today. They need some more volunteers. It's going to be an amazing effort called Super Blitz. Desiree Doherty, please come to the podium. By the way, our new member orientation was conducted by Terry McDonald. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today my friend and colleague and our newest Rotary member, Annie Tomachek. I also want to acknowledge our fellow Rotarian, Stephanie Cameron, who helped recruit Annie as well. Annie is Supervisor of Global Community Relations at T.D. Williamson. T.D. Williamson is a 95-year-old family-owned global company providing pipeline equipment and services and solutions. As a fourth-generation member of the Williamson family, Annie leads TDW's worldwide programs in employee engagement and corporate citizenship, using employee skills and nonprofit partnerships to find creative solutions for positive change in local communities around the world where TDW operates. Annie is a graduate of DePaul University with a degree in art, minoring in philosophy and psychology. She also holds a management certificate for corporate citizenship from Boston College. Annie's experiences have taken her from being an early childhood educator in Indianapolis to a freelance artist. She had a small business and provided hand-painted furniture and murals for children, and was a featured artist and designer in the Designer Showcase 2000. Annie also taught Sunday school and Vacation Bible School, and she's very active in the local nonprofit community, which is how we met. Currently, she is the president of the board for the Center for Individuals with Physical Challenges. She also serves on the boards of Tulsa Global Alliance and Community Service Council. She's the chairman of the Tulsa Area Community Schools Initiative Steering Committee and serves on the United Way Women's Leadership Steering Committee, the Executive Committee for Tulsa Girls Art School Project, the Child Abuse Network Nominating Committee, the United Way Community Investments Cabinet, and the Funders Roundtable. Annie received the inaugural Through a Child's Eye Award for Women Empowering Girls in the Arts from Tulsa Girls Art School in 2012. She mentors in the Reading Partners program and serves on the STEM Alliance Steering Committee. Obviously, Annie lives the Rotarian value of service above self. Annie is mom to 4 daughters also, Sarah, Katie, Molly, and Sammy. Please help me welcome Annie Tomachek.
We are so thrilled to have Annie as a member of our club, and I want to thank Stephanie and Desiree for bringing her to us. Annie, welcome. And project announcements, Trey, I can't imagine what you want to talk about today. Yeah, right.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians, friends, and guests. As usual, I'm up here for my weekly plea of table sales for IBA. We're in the home stretch now. We've got less than a month to the event. We still have tables available, so this is really a call to action for everyone. I desperately need your help to get this event sold out. The way we've plotted the tables out, we're roughly 10 tables short of a sellout, but we do still have room in the ballroom to add more tables if needed. We'd like to have an event as large as last year's. It helps drive everything that we're all so passionate about within the club, whether it's Camp Enterprise, Crescendo, Shop with a Cop, whatever it is within this club that you love, that you live to work for. This event is going to support it. So we in turn need your support as well. Please help us get this sold out. I look forward to seeing everyone on June 16th, and we do still have one announcement coming that I got to tease one more time. So next week, I'll have one more big announcement, and then it's off to IBA. Thank you very much.
All right, let's help Trey out. That's going to be an incredible evening, as you all know. So let's get some tables sold. Thank you, Trey. All right, Bob McKenzie, you've got a great volunteer opportunity for us. I'm signed up. I need some friends.
Yes, you do.
I do.
Was that good or what? On May 31st, Tour de Cure will be leaving from Southcrest Hospital. Maybe it's Hillcrest South now. And we need volunteers to come out. How many people in here know somebody that has diabetes? Good. Y'all can come help. My team will be riding in this, 36P. We'll be in our pink kits. Last week I asked you to come out and kick Lucky over, but really I don't want you to do that. I want you to take his bike away from him and hold him hostage for a while so that I can keep up. But really, we need help with signing up people and handing out water bottles and doing whatever you'd like. You can stay as little or as long as you like. So please come out and help support Tour de Cure. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Bob. And as you look around your table, you might say to each other, who's going to go with me? So Karen is not alone at Tour de Cure. Okay. Sarge, come on down.
Greetings, how's everybody today? Thank you. Hit it. Okay, my catch this week, and thank you, anonymous person, for sending this to me, is Steve August. Did anybody read the article in the newspaper about Steve? Wasn't it great? And anyway, we're thrilled that he got some recognition for some really hard hits. And I guess I'm okay with the Seahawk thing since I'm a Bronco fan. But that's okay, I have Seahawk earrings too. So I covered it all. But Steve, wherever you are, I think you're here today. Yeah. Anyway, we caught you. It was a great shot too. Thank you, Dell. Okay, Delise, she's celebrating her birthday. Most of all, she's celebrating her daughter's graduation from OU, and then her 28 years of marriage to Craig. So thanks for the $100 fine. Appreciate that. Yeah. And then this is kind of unusual. Stephen, 52 years of life to date, $31 meeting his wife at OSU, $17 for 6 kids and in. But the penny goes to Ed. And I don't know why, unless it's some kind of OU, OSU, but we can't donate that penny to OU. I'm sorry. It has to go to Rotary. And that's all I have this week. Have a good week.
Thank you, Janet. And now, our Rotarian of the day is Mike Homan. Mike joined our club in October of 1991. He is the Vice President and Regional Manager of Terracon. He is both a Club Foundation Fellow and a Paul Harris Fellow. So please welcome our Rotarian of the day, Mike Homan.
Thank you, President Karen. Our speaker today is Neal McCaleb. Neal is the former head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington and has twice led Oklahoma's transportation system. An enrolled member of the Chickasaw Nation, Neal was appointed by President George Bush to lead the Bureau of Indian Affairs in 2001. In nearly 2 years at the post, Neal led the reorganization of the BIA to make it a more responsive and effective trustee organization for Native American interests. Since leaving the BIA in 2003, Neal has served the Chickasaw Nation as an advisor to Governor Bill Anatubby. He is charged in that role with assisting the Chickasaw Nation with the development of long-term economic strategies. Neal served more than 10 years as the State Secretary of Transportation for former Governors Frank Keating and Henry Bellman. While Transportation Secretary and Director of the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority, Neal helped develop plans for the John Kilpatrick Turnpike in Oklahoma City and the Creek Turnpike here in Tulsa. Under Governor Keating, he led the largest highway construction program in state history. A civil engineer by training, Neal graduated from Oklahoma A&M College in 1957 among the last class of Aggies. He was in the private practice of engineering and real estate development for 32 years. He's also spent 20 years in public service, including 8 years in the state legislature. During his tenure in the House of Representatives, he served 4 years as the Republican floor leader. Neal's been married to Georgianne for 50 years, and they have 4 grown children and 13 grandchildren. Neal's been heard to say that he and Georgianne's goal is to get the Chickasaw Nation back up to fighting strength. And on a personal note, it's been my privilege as part of the engineering community to watch Neal in action as he advocates for a better transportation system for our state. He truly loves this state and has a driving passion for improving our infrastructure. So please join me in welcoming Neal to the podium to speak to us today about the importance of water resources in Oklahoma.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for being here today. What a great audience. What an honor it is to speak to the Tulsa downtown Rotarians. The title that I was assigned was Oklahoma Water Resources, really because of the tension, I think, between the Chickasaw and Choctaw Nation and the state of Oklahoma over the water in southeast Oklahoma that's resulted in a high visibility lawsuit. But the foundation of that lawsuit and the tension between the state and the tribes is that of tribal sovereignty. And I want to speak about that a little because it's poorly understood, I think. Most people, even here in Oklahoma, where all of us just about claim some tribal affiliation or ancestry, most people think of tribal sovereignty as kind of a relic of the ancient past that really does not have any applicability to circumstances today. Most notably, we see it manifested in the very robust gaming activity that exists in Oklahoma, and certainly that's true. But just by way of to establish the legitimacy of tribal sovereignty and the relationship of the tribes to the federal government, I want to cite a couple of historical facts. You know, how did tribal sovereignty get started? Well, when the sovereigns of Europe came to colonize this country, they needed somebody to do business with to cede title to the land, and so that they would have a legitimate claim to it. And so they recognized tribal organizations as sovereigns, much like their own sovereignty. And that was carried forward not only through the colonial period, but through the establishment of the young republic. And it was incorporated into our Constitution in Section 1, in Article 1, Section 8, and tested in the early 19th century when the state of Georgia decided they were going to extend their authority over the Cherokee tribe and tried to do so. And actually, it was a non-Indian, a Presbyterian minister that they were going to send to jail because he was supporting tribal sovereignty. And anyway, went to the Supreme Court. Judge Marshall was the Chief Justice, and he handed down 3 decisions in this case, all of which favored the tribes. And basically, it said that tribes were, in the United States, were sovereign, dependent governments to the United States. And since that sovereignty predated all the states west of the Mississippi in most states, that sovereignty precedes and is therefore superior to those states. And the tribe's relationships is directly with the United States government and supersedes the state. Well, Indian policy unfolded over 200 years, and is not exactly the pride of this nation in its history. But first was pacification to bring the tribes to heel, so to speak. And the second was the treaty period in which the United States entered into treaties, sovereign to sovereign. And the third was they decided this isn't such a good idea after all. We need to allot this land so that they become farmers. And so the Dawes Act of 1887 did just that. It allotted to each Indian, and it had reached his or her majority, 160 acres of ground. But there was a lot of land left over, and voila, it was open for settlement to non-Indians. It's, I hasten to say without sounding prejudicial, it's always been about the land. As Oklahoma approached the end of the 19th century, where we had, 5 sovereign governments in eastern Oklahoma that came here as a result of the treaty in the early 1830s, in which they ceded their land east of the Mississippi for new lands west of the Mississippi in what became Indian Territory and is now the state of Oklahoma, and were given title in fee simple to all the rights, privileges, and emoluments pertaining to that land, including the surface rights, the mineral rights, the water rights, and the air rights, if you please. Then as Oklahoma became a state, subsequent to the Curtis Act in 1898, Congress let the twin territories, Oklahoma Territory and Indian Territory, come together in a constitutional convention, and that was permitted by an act of Congress to let them have a constitutional convention. And Section 1 of that document, which is the predicate for our state government, said simply, nothing in that Constitution shall in any way diminish or impair the rights of the Indian people already inhabiting the territories. That seemed harmless at the time, but it did protect tribal rights and individual rights. Now, what happened in the meantime? Well, from the end of the treaty period till about 1934, the Indian domain nationally was diminished from 150 million acres to 50 million acres. Obviously, the direction was to eliminate the tribal estate. But in 1934, during the Roosevelt administration, it's hard for an old rock rib Republican to say, but during the Roosevelt administration, there was a change in relation to Indian affairs. And it said that we're going to protect these land rights, and they passed the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934. And I'm going to fast forward to President Nixon in 1970. In the interim, there was various Indian policies, including termination, which said, well, there's one way to solve what they call the Indian problem, and that's to terminate all the rights. Like somebody in a land contest, and you say, well, the court's just going to terminate your rights to the deed to your property. Indian policy had never worked. For 175 years, it had never worked. And Richard Nixon gave I call it the Nixon Manifesto to Congress in 1970, when it said the United States government has utterly failed in its role to provide Indian people, Native Americans, indigenous people, with a equal claim and right that they have to this country. And we've done it by mismanaging their affairs. And he said the solution to this is to let the tribes manage their own affairs. And it resulted in the Indian Self-Determination Act and Education Act of 1975. Congress didn't pass it because it was a Democrat Congress and President Nixon was not, until he ignominiously left office in 1974. But anyway, they passed it in 1975, and that was a landmark change of direction in Indian policy in the United States, which is still a policy today. And as a result of that, tribes began to take over their own affairs and manifest their sovereignty, because sovereignty is kind of like a muscle. What happens to a muscle if you don't exercise it? It atrophies. And that's what had happened to tribal sovereignty. It had never gone away. It just hadn't been exercised, and it had atrophied. But with the governments taking over their own affairs, they began to exercise that tribal sovereignty. And you can imagine they came into contest with the states in which they were located. In Oklahoma, it was manifested over lawsuits and contests between Oklahoma and the tribes over taxation, the right to tax or not to tax. Cigarette tax is a classic example of that. More recently, in 1995, the state of Oklahoma decided to sue the Chickasaw Nation, my tribe, and its governor, Governor Anatubby, because we were selling gasoline and we weren't remitting the tax that was charged on the gasoline to the state. And the Supreme Court held the state had no authority to collect that tax from the state. And they made a broad decision, by the way, which is much broader than anybody anticipated. They said it applies to all Indian lands and former Indian lands within the boundaries of the state of Oklahoma. Well, that's the whole state, save the Panhandle, and a little bit down in the corner south of the North Fork of the Red River. Yeah, well, you talk about a person that was conflicted. I had just become, for a second time, the Secretary Director of the Department of Transportation, and our sole source of revenue was the gas tax. So the future did not look bright. But cooler heads prevailed, and they reached an agreement, and Governor Anatubby was a principal participant in that, as was Tom Love, Love's Country Stores. Anyway, the result of it was manifested in legislation which said that the Indians will not try to avoid state taxes for 25 years, and the state will move the collection from the vendor, the people that sold the gasoline, to the refinery. And we'll remit 4.5 cents of that gasoline tax, or 4.5% of that gasoline tax, to the several tribes that compact with the state. And everybody thought, well, that's a big loss of revenue. But when they did it, voila, the gasoline taxes went up 6%. Seemed like there was a lot of vendors that couldn't differentiate between their money and the state's. Anyway, it was a win-win for the tribes and the states. And I think most of the controversy between the two sovereigns within our borders can be resolved that way instead of by adversarial relationships. Now comes the water issue. The state of Oklahoma made a deal with Oklahoma City to pay off about a $30 million plus debt they had to the Corps of Engineers that they had systematically stiffed the Corps on for about 20 years and hadn't paid anything on it. And Oklahoma City said, well, we'll step into your shoes. This was for the construction of Sardis Reservoir, southeastern Oklahoma in the Kiamishi watershed. And Oklahoma City said, we'll step into your shoes and we'll pay off that debt for the storage rights in that reservoir, about 134,000 acre feet. I think the state had every ability to do that. They owed for the reservoir. They were going to pay for it for somebody paying it for them. But it was just the bucket. It was not the water in the well. It was the storage right. And there's a corollary or codicil to that agreement. There was an agreement which is largely denied today by the state, that the state would in fact give them 132,000 acre feet of water out of the Kiamishi River without specifying the point of diversion. Well, the tribes tried to negotiate around that for a long time. I was a party to some of those conferences with governors and legislative leaders and all the high cyclopses in state government with no avail. So finally, while they were going to execute this, the tribes came forward and said, if you persist in this, we're going to have to file a lawsuit to claim our right and legitimate rights in this water, in this basin. And the state did, and they did, and so the issue was joined. Both sides feeling that the Oklahoma Water Resources Board says we have the sole authority to allocate and regulate the waters in all the state streams. Boom, that's pretty universal. That covers everybody's water, including the tribes. And the tribes said, oops, no you don't. You just moved your cattle onto our side of the fence. And that's where the issue was joined and where it is today, except they are trying to negotiate or mediate a solution that will make it possible for some of this water transfer to take place and protect the in-stream water flows, to protect the environment and the aqua life that is dependent upon that, and to protect the economic advantage that southeastern Oklahoma has by virtue of that water. So how that'll come out, I don't know. The court placed a rigid gag order on everybody participating in that mediation. And the best I can tell you is the Governor Anatubby says, we're making progress. And how long that'll take, I don't know. What is the implication for Oklahoma? Well, for the tribes, the water is a tactical issue. What is the strategic issue to them is the recognition of their tribal sovereignty in the area of the water rights. And they're not going to back away from that. And they have historically won in court every time they've challenged the state on that issue. One of the, or the federal government, the tribes, Cherokees and the Choctaws and Chickasaws said, we have the right to the land under the Arkansas River up to the headwaters of navigation under our treaty. And they sued the federal government back in the 70s and won unconditionally. And wasn't until about 2002 that they settled with the federal government for what that land under the Arkansas was worth and distributed it to the tribes. Now, that's the legitimacy of how we got to tribal sovereignty as we see it today. The next really important question to you and to me is, what is the efficacy of exercise of that tribal sovereignty? What is the usefulness of it? What is it to Oklahoma? Or is it negative? Well, to try to demonstrate our point, we hired or engaged the Oklahoma City University's Minders School of Business to do an in-depth study and build an economic model by which to forecast or which to determine what the economic impact of tribal governments were on the state of Oklahoma. Here's just a couple of findings. Number one, they created both primary and secondary 87,000 jobs in the state of Oklahoma. Pretty significant employer, right? Who knows what employer employs more than 87,000 people? I don't think there is any. Of course, that's collective of all the tribes. Secondly, the economic impact on the state of Oklahoma, the grease that lubricates the gears of our progress, was $10.2 billion. That's with a B. Back now, those are just numbers, like they say in the ads on TV. That's just a number. What does it mean? Well, when I first went into the legislature in the early 1970s, 40 years ago, the big burning issue was the decline of population, the economy in rural Oklahoma. Well, frantically, we were all running around with our hair on fire. What do we do to stem that, to reinvigorate the economy in rural Oklahoma and to make the rural towns in Oklahoma viable? Well, 40 years later, we hadn't done anything that was effective, except for the tribes, because the tribes' offices largely are where? In rural Oklahoma. And these are headquarters that will never leave Oklahoma. They'll never move to Houston or Dallas or San Antonio or Canada, for that matter. And their employment base is significant. And they have reinvigorated the economy. And I think those numbers that I just recited explain part of that. Now, people say, well, it's just gambling. Well, it's not just gambling. Chickasaws have a very healthy and robust non-gaming industry. I'm the chairman of the board of Chickasaw Nation Enterprises, which is one small aspect of it. We employ 1,600 people. Our offices are in Norman, Oklahoma. We have other offices in 40 of the 50 states, and we do a pretty substantial amount of business. I won't recite those numbers to you, but it's a lot of money. And we're able to add about 8% of that gross to the bottom line. And where does that go? Well, we send it back to the Chickasaw Nation, as does the gaming industry, and they reinvest in the human capital of our state. For example, we built a 300,000 square foot hospital in Ada at a cost of some $140 million. Flintco built it for us, by the way. We have 5 other major clinics, health clinics, geographically distributed throughout the historic Chickasaw Nation. So the health care of our people is not the responsibility of the state. It's taken care of by the tribe and taken care of very well. Education. I mentioned that I had 13 grandchildren. The Chickasaws have provided scholarships for their college education for anybody that can maintain a 2.5 GPA. And that's not a huge bar to cross, are eligible for very nice scholarships, not a full ride by any, but an incentive to go on to college. Housing, we've made major investments in housing, both subsidized housing and direct ownership housing, whereby we provide attainable mortgages. Our bank, which we own, is the largest buyer of last resort of the FHA 184 program. Those numbers don't mean anything, but it's an exclusively mortgage program, people of Native American descent. And you don't have to live on Indian land. Any place you can live, you're eligible for it. It means a reduced interest rate and reduced thresholds for down payments. Health, education, housing are just 3 of the major social areas that the tribe reinvests the money that it makes. And 4th, equally as important, is economic development. I've mentioned a few things. We also own a candy factory, and it's a good one, by the way. Bed Ray Chocolates are manufactured down at a new factory we built just off I-35 at State Highway 7. We sell our candies to some of the best. Neiman Marcus is one of our better customers. We have a manufacturing plant at Marietta, which we employ 70 people. The plant was originally established by Siemens of Germany, a huge German conglomerate. And they manufactured baggage handling equipment. They decided to abandon that. And the Chickasaws stepped in order to protect the employment base and bought it. We bought it on the cheap. We bought it for book value. But we had to carry it for about 10 years at a marginal operating profit or loss in some years until we got really serious in the energy business, and now we're manufacturing pressure vessels for major energy E&P people throughout the state of Oklahoma. Well, bottom line to all this, now I won't drone on about it. If it sounds like bragging, I apologize, but not very much. What was it they said? If it's so, it ain't bragging. But bottom line is the tribes and their economy make a huge contribution to the economic and social welfare and the health of the people of the state of Oklahoma. So I'm not apologetic about tribal sovereignty. I think, as I said, it's legitimate. It is established by the Supreme Court of the United States and other court decisions of our judiciary and recognized by Congress. Incidentally, the Congress can change it any time they want to, and they have many times. They've just negated treaties or walked away from them. The fact that Oklahoma, eastern Oklahoma, was taken literally from the 5 tribes is evidence of the Curtis Act in 1898. That is, King's X, those treaties that we signed in 1830 are not applicable today. They're ruinous. No, my mother was allotted in 1904. We kept our land in fee simple. You had a chance to either take your land in trust and let the BIA manage it, or take it in fee simple. We elected to take our land in fee simple. My great-grandfather was very judicious. He was smart enough to take his allotment on top of the Fitztown oil field, which the revenues from that are still going to the McCaleb legacy. But the point is, Oklahoma is much better off with our tribal sovereigns than states without them. And that's a long way around about saying it's great to be an Oklahoman. I've spent my entire life here. Most of you know that Oklahoma is the Choctaw word for red man, or land of the red man. And it happened, Allen Wright named the territory in 1866, right after the Civil War, when the United States was trimming some more land off of the Chickasaw-Choctaw land base, as I guess reparations for us picking the wrong side in the Civil War. But it established, I think, the relationship of these governments to the state. And I'm going to end there just by saying thank you for your attention, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for being Rotarians, and God bless Oklahoma.
Neal, with your extensive background in our highways, how bad is our infrastructure?
Well, it was crummy. It was really bad. Everybody focuses on the fact that we were number one in substandard bridges. And that's bad enough, but we've made real progress on that. Gary Ridley is director, and actually the legislature's given us a lot of new revenues. We hadn't had a revenue increase from 1986 until 2006. The revenue stayed dead flat, whereas the costs, as you can imagine, that 20 years were escalating, and the traffic was escalating, and the legislature just didn't react. And we tried to pass a gas tax in 2005. I was chairman of that ignominious effort. We had the honor of being beat worse than any other public vote or referendum in the history of the state. I think we got 13% of the vote. And that was all our families. But we did make an impact on the legislature, and a year later, they started to send revenue to the Department of Transportation. The revenue in 2006, or appropriations, about $250 million. At the end of this escalating legislative appropriation, it'll be $570 million. So that's a substantial increase, and ODOT is putting it to good use and good work. We've reduced the number of substandard bridges on the state highway system from about 870 to less than 400, and by the end of this decade, we should approach zero. Now, what's to be done in the future? Well, two-lane roads with no shoulders, short sight distances, bad alignments. We got a lot of them. And they were inherited from the time when the mode of travel was basically Model A's. My dad was with the department all his adult career. And the roads that he built early in his career were very good for Model A's and 1930 Chevrolets, but they're inadequate, wholly inadequate for the cars, the streak of lightning cars that we drive today. And we lose more people from head-on accidents where you get one wheel off the shoulder and overcorrect and boom, if there's a traffic coming at you, there's a fatality. So we have a lot of work to do. And fortunately, the legislature is providing ODOT with the tools to do it. And the Turnpike Authority has made major improvements in their safety. We started by putting in those median barriers on the Will Rogers and on the Turner, and reduced our fatalities, crossover fatalities, almost to nothing. So safety is a huge deal. And now I'm going to do a little bragging here because this happened when I was director in 2000, not because of any original idea of mine, but we had built the Hefner Parkway in Oklahoma City. Many of you may be familiar with it, but it's a really fine road, 6 lanes wide, runs parallel to the east side of Lake Hefner. People were driving 65 and 70 or 75 miles an hour on it. We had a 60-foot median, which according to the Green Book, which is the engineer's Bible for design, that was adequate. But a lot of people were crossing over, and when they did, you had half of 45,000 cars a day coming straight at you. And in 1 year, we actually had 6 fatalities on a 5-mile section of road. And editor in the north part of Oklahoma City got on our case and just wouldn't let up. And I said, well, we got to put a median barrier in there. Well, that facility was not designed like the turnpikes, which drained to the outside. It drained to the center median. And to put it, make a long story short, that was terribly expensive. And one of our traffic engineers, a guy by the name of Harold Smart, who is well named, brought to me the idea of a cable barrier, high-tension cable barrier called the Briffin system that was used in England, but not in this country because it was foreign-made and it was proprietary, and the FHA wouldn't let us use it. Well, we pressed them, got a research project on 1 mile of it in Oklahoma City. First car hit it, tangled up like it was in a spider web, went no place, and they permitted us to go ahead and install another 5 miles. And the performance of that high-tension cable barrier has dramatically reduced the crossover accidents on those kinds of highways, high-speed divided highways. And now it's a national standard, and it started a key right here in Oklahoma. If I have a credit to my professional career, that's it in my mind, because we save lives.
That is a true public servant in every way, shape, and form. Thank you. And something that most people probably don't know, the tribes actually cooperate with the county commissioners throughout Oklahoma on road projects. I know the Cherokees right now are working on some out north. The Creek Nation has reached out to us. So they have some dollars that they say, these impact our lands. Let's work together on these road projects to correct.
$60 million a year, put a number on it.
Thank you for that. I did not know the total. $60 million a year go into those road projects. So we appreciate that as county commissioners. So again, thank you so much. I learned more. I cannot believe in Oklahoma history we don't know any of that. I mean, that was amazing. Thank you, Professor. I'm just going to, thank you. And Mr. McCaleb, we have a book we would like for you to sign. It goes to our adopted school, Celia Clinton, and you've never heard of Willie Mays, and it's really cool. Can you see that? Kind of cool. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind signing that. And our upcoming program, Drew Diamond will be here to talk about the Sherwin Miller Museum of Jewish Art. That's next week, so you don't want to miss out on that. And now, our mystery Rotarian. Our mystery Rotarian started his athletic career boxing in Enid. He would go on to compete at the Nationals. Being simply irresistible, he married Norma and is the proud papa of Karen, who is a star in her own right, as she is well known in athletic circles. And from the Oklahoma Military Academy in Claremore, our mystery Rotarian launched his career in the Army, ending up commander of the 172nd, and finally a colonel. And as you have probably already figured out, Jim Morrison, a member of our club since 1976, is our mystery Rotarian. Thank you, Jim. Where are you? He's right over here somewhere. There. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate you. And he was just written up. Rogers State University did something on the Oklahoma Military Academy, and he and his wife were featured. They've done a lot for the school. So thank you so much. We're proud of you. And with that, we will close this Rotary meeting. See you next week.